you for making time for this tonight. It's so good to see a room full of people interested in a safety topic. Sometimes you talk safety and people's ears tend to tend to close up and eyes glaze over, so it's really good seeing the community so well represented. So congratulations on being here. Thank you for that. So what we're going to talk about tonight is crew overboard and what would you do. Let's first start with some terminology. So many of us grew up with the term man overboard. Well, this is the modern version of that, crew overboard, because we believe in equal opportunity, don't we? And women are just as likely to fall overboard as the men, perhaps more likely, because of some things we do on boats. But anyhow, so crew overboard, just to clarify for anybody if they're wondering what that term means, it's synonymous or the same as man overboard. So what I need to stress, so tonight is just a safety talk. It's not any official certification, and what I'm hoping to do is to create some interest and perhaps have you think about taking some official training, and I've got some links coming up with that a little bit later. All right. Yeah. So the topics for tonight, we'll talk about cold water immersion and a bit on hypothermia. And then talk about safety equipment. I'm glad to see a lot of people brought their inflatable PFDs. We'll talk about the importance of training, and then the last thing we'll do is we'll do a bit of a practical with our inflatable PFDs. Well, I got to turn this on. There we go. All right. Yeah, so just a little bit about me. So I'm a Sail Canada certified instructor. I've done, my background in sailing is racing. So here's a picture of this is about 10 years ago, our crew after the Vic Maui race. So it was about a 17-day trip over to Hawaii. I've done that twice and done about 3 Van Isle 360s races around Vancouver Island. And as Paul was saying, Roberta, my wife, and I, we brought our boat all the way here from Croatia. So a fair bit of sailing experience, but I kind of want to put us in a bit of a different frame of mind. So I arrived in Hawaii with my good friends here. Part of the racing rules of sailing is around training requirements. So every one of my friends attended a 2-day offshore safety course where we inflated life rafts, we jumped in and out of life rafts. Our friend Dave Sutcliffe, he took us out sailing at night, and we would practice crew overboard, so we'd be full sailing, have the boat right on the limits, and with all surprise, with half the crew down, we would throw a ring overboard and yell crew overboard, and each one of these folks had to get back to that crew overboard because we needed to have that confidence in each other. Because when you're 1,000 miles offshore, you're on your own if somebody falls over. This is great, and a lot of what I teach in the safety courses, I'm teaching racing crews. But I'm a bit more cruiser, and so I'm really happy to see so many people out tonight, because I think the job that we have as cruisers is a lot more difficult. So, race crew, all fully trained. This is probably more familiar to you, right? It's just most of us boat with a crew of 2, right? Yourself and one other. And so that's the kind of question I want to put in your head tonight is if you had a crew overboard, what would you do? Because if it's just you and your spouse, well, you've lost half your crew, right? There's only one of you left on board. And so that's the real question I want to put in each of your minds tonight is if you were coming out of the marina. So here's a nice picture of our boat sitting at the dock here in Ladysmith. We've my wife and I, we work all week long. So it's Saturday morning, I guess that's Friday, that's the sun coming up, so maybe that was a Friday evening. And we're all excited to get out on the boat and go boating. So we got the boat all stocked up. We pull out of our slip, and we're coming out of, we're in D dock, right? We're coming out of the fairway. Roberta's bringing up the fenders, and she falls overboard. So we're 2 on board, so what are you going to do? And that's what I want you to be thinking about tonight. And that's why I selected this topic, is because it's probably, out of all the emergencies that any of us could be involved in the water, this is probably one of the most realistic emergencies out there, is one of us falling overboard. So that's what I'd like to talk about tonight. Yeah, so there's the reference for tonight. You're a crew of 2, and one of you falls overboard. So this is I think we'd agree, a situation that could happen to all of us, right? So first I'd like to talk about cold water immersion. I came across this site at the boat show this year, this shock factor. So if you want to do a little bit of additional research, you can look at that shock factor. Just Google search, I think it's a .ca. But I was quite shocked by that. Yeah, so this is a Canadian website, so this isn't US statistics, right? But this is Canadian statistics. So yeah, one boater will drown each day during our boating season. So that's quite an alarming statistic. Drowning is one of I think it's one of the top 3 causes of death for people under the age of 60. So it's just that prevalent. Yeah. Well, once we hit 60, some other things might come into play. So the under 60 demographic and some of that. But yeah, the key is that this is something that could very realistically happen to any of us. So what's the maximum temperature that our water gets to, at least in the Ladysmith area? 64? Okay. How about I'm a bit younger, so Celsius, that's 15, 17. Yeah. Anyways, well under 20 or 20 degrees Celsius or 70 Fahrenheit, I think we would argue. You can get hypothermic in the Caribbean by falling in the water, right? So 25 degrees. So anything under 75 or 25 degrees Celsius, you can become hypothermic. Now, what's important to understand with hypothermia is, years ago we used to think of, we used to hear a lot about exposure, right? Somebody came to exposure. Did a little bit more research, and then the terminology kind of changed to hypothermia, right? So hypothermia, our body core is about 37 degrees Celsius, and it just needs to drop by 1 degree for us to be hypothermic. But that's actually not the killer out there for us. The killer out there for us is that initial shock. If you were leaning back on your chair here, being a bad person, and the chair went back, what's the first thing that you would do? Right? You're surprised. When you fall overboard, do you plan to fall overboard? No, you're surprised, right? You probably tripped over something. That's how most people get into trouble. They fall overboard, it's that shock, and you ingest water, and it goes downhill quick from there. So I'm going to just play a little bit of a video here called the Cold Water Boot Camp. So it's about a 10-minute video.
Nine volunteers, 7-degree water. This is Cold Water Boot Camp. Nine hardy volunteers have been selected from across the country to be subjected to icy cold water and teach them how to survive an accidental cold water immersion. The instructor for boot camp is Dr. Gordon Giesbrecht, professor of thermophysiology at the University of Manitoba.
Good morning. Welcome to Cold Water Boot Camp. The best way to find out about cold water immersion is to get right in. So we're going to give you your gear. I want you to go get changed, and you're all going to go for a swim.
We're going to show you why people die in cold water, why cold water continues to take lives each and every year. You see, most people just don't understand the effects of cold water immersion, and some end up paying the ultimate price. So pay attention. This program could save your life. As our boot campers head to the water, here are a few cold, hard facts.
A recent study of drowning statistics by the Life Saving Society revealed that when it came to boaters, 60% drowned in water under 10 degrees, and 34% drowned in water between 10 and 20 degrees. What makes it even more chilling is the fact that 43% were less than 2 meters from safety. The majority, about 90%, were not wearing a life jacket. A study by the Canadian Safe Boating Council found that some people say they don't wear life jackets because they're close to shore, or that they feel they can put it on in the water if they need it. And most, well, they said they didn't need it because they could swim.
Well, as our boot campers are about to find out, in this 6-degree water, none of those reasons are valid.
One by one, our volunteers undertook their first immersion, designed to gauge their response to cold water as they attempted to swim towards shore. Most experienced the typical gasp response and had to work at controlling their breathing. But eventually, cold, tired muscles made swimming difficult, and the rescue swimmers moved in to take them back to shore, where specially equipped emergency tents were waiting.
The folks who failed quickly were very interesting because they would have drowned if they didn't have somebody to rescue them. But they weren't, again, medically hypothermic or cold. So all they had was cold muscle tissue, which didn't work. And as you get weaker, you'll fail, and then you'll drown. Well, how's it going, folks? You had a great time? I had a great day. How about you?
After drying off and warming up, Dr. Giesbrecht brought the boot campers into the classroom, where they'd learn about what just happened and prepare for the next challenge with valuable information about cold water immersion.
I have one question. How long do you think it would take to become hypothermic in water that was the temperature out there today? We've actually done a survey on 661 folks who come to cold-related seminars, so they're already biased a bit in that they're interested in the topic. 50% of the respondents said under 5 minutes, just becoming hypothermic. And I think, like I can tell you that none of you were hypothermic today. Maybe after you got out and when you started really shivering, that was because your core temperature had an after drop. You might have dropped a degree or two, but while you were in there, probably not at all. And basically if you go on here, like if you add that, 70% of the people who responded said 10 minutes or less. And this little block here is important because that's the right answer. It's a half an hour or more. And only about 5% of the people, no matter who you ask, whether they're blue collar, white collar workers, medical professionals, rescue workers, very few people really understand that. And as we go through the rest of this hour, it'll become real clear why that's an important point to know. So if you look at this graph, this is kind of core temperature. The red line is core temperature. Here's normal, 37 to 35, down to 25 over time. This is in really, really cold water, ice water, or maybe 5 degrees. And you can see that if you're in the water, the temperature, of course, will drop. And around 30 degrees Celsius core temperature is when you stop shivering. And most of you were shivering pretty intently today. But just losing consciousness is not what causes you to die from hypothermia. It's cardiac arrest. And the heart temperature has to get down around 25 to 28 degrees before the heart will actually stop. So we devised a way to remember all three phases and to remember this graph with what we call the 1-10-1 principle. And the first thing, of course, is do not panic, because you have 1 minute to get your breathing under control, you have 10 minutes of meaningful movement, and 1 hour before you become unconscious due to hypothermia. Now this is in ice water, so if it's 5 degrees like you're in today, these numbers will be a little bit longer. But the point is you actually can survive a long time in cold water if you had a PFD on. So the 1-10-1 principle, the first part of that is you have 1 minute to get your breathing under control. So regarding the cold shock responses, consider these following things. First of all, do not panic. And the other thing is focus on surviving the first minute by getting control of your breathing. So the second effect, cold incapacitation. It's just muscle and nerve cells, as they get colder, they work less and less. And once that happens, you need to prepare for the eventuality that you will not be able to do anything for yourself. So how can you minimize cold incapacitation? Obviously don't fall in the water. Get out of the water as quickly as you can if you are in there. If you can't, then you want to get as much of your body out of the water as possible, like holding onto an overturned boat or sitting in an upright boat that even if it's underwater, it can still keep much of your body out of the water if you're sitting on there. Maybe you would want to attach yourself to something that is floating, whatever, because as you get colder, you will get weaker, and eventually you won't be able to do anything. Now, if you survive the immediate short-term and mid-term phases, cold shock response, cold incapacitation, and you've not been rescued, but you're able to keep your head above water, you have a life jacket on, then you'll enter the third phase, which is hypothermia. And again, we said that takes at least 30 minutes to maybe an hour. Even in cold, ice, cold water. An excuse many people use for not wearing a life jacket is if they ever ended up in the water, they could put one on. So we had all of our campers try that. And although they all did get it on, it was difficult for all of them. Today we had our campers do several tests. Some of them are speed of movement tests, strength tests, reboarding a boat, and working a radio. And they all did it fairly well at the beginning, and then we did it again 20 and some of them 40 minutes later. They were all pretty well able to do it, but they all commented, and you could see very obviously that it was belabored movement, it was slower, and they just had a difficult time. Indeed, a couple of the campers were not able to get into the boat.
Two of our volunteers, Eric and Antoine, remained in the cold water to experience mild hypothermia. And after about an hour, the signs were clear and rescue teams swung into action. Eric had spent almost 1 hour in the water, and when he was finally returned to the dock, the temperature telemetry pill that Eric swallowed before his immersion showed a core temperature drop of just over 1 degree Celsius. Eric was packed and taken to the rewarming tent to join his hypothermic partner, Antoine. After 53 minutes in the water, Antoine's slimmer body mass experienced a greater drop of about 2.5 degrees Celsius during his swim.
We did another interesting comparison today. We took Ryan and Chris and Alice out, and Chris and Alice wore life jackets and Ryan didn't, and they kind of swam together.
Ryan started off stronger than his first swim, with Alice and Chris in their life jackets following closely behind. But after a short time, it became obvious that Ryan was weakening rapidly, and he was rescued from the 6-degree water. Alice was still floating, but unable to go any further and gladly returned to the boat. However, the point was made that with flotation, she would have been able to survive much longer through to unconsciousness from hypothermia and eventual rescue. In contrast to his first 2.5-minute swim, Chris was able to control his breathing and swim confidently towards shore, covering quite a distance in the 23 minutes before being brought aboard.
I think cold water boot camp has really demonstrated the 3 phases of cold water immersion. We saw lots of the cold shock, we saw lots of cold incapacitation, and we had 2 people go to hypothermia. And it took a long time to get them hypothermic. So it kind of just reinforces the 1-10-1 principle. You have 1 minute to get your breathing under control. Do not panic. You have 10 minutes or maybe 20 in this kind of water of meaningful movement. And then you have an hour, or in this case maybe 2 hours, before you become unconscious due to hypothermia. And of course, you only get to that point if you have a life jacket on. If you don't have flotation, then you will definitely die in the first 2 phases. But when you do that, you'll be perfectly normothermic.
I'm going to share my story for sure, and emphasize with family.
All right, I think that's good enough. Hopefully you enjoyed that. You can research that, Google it if you want to have a look at it, or show anybody else, just cold water boot camp. The one you'll find on YouTube is an American version, and they have a lot of heavy metal to it, so it's a, it's a nice little change up. But also have a look at that shock shock factor website. So it seems that some of the terminology or some of the teachings are changing, where if you watch this newer video, the shock factor, the cold water boot camp's probably 5, 8, 10 years old now. So they're now just talking about shock. They've taken the cold water piece out of it. And so hopefully, yeah, that's the thing that, so again, we're talking about a couple cruising here. So, I'm going to break this up into 2 pieces. So the person that's fallen into the water and then the person that's still on board. So if you're the person in the water, the first thing to remember is don't have that gasp reflex, right? Try and control your breathing. Do not inhale the water. Get through that first minute. And if you get yourself through the first minute, then you're going to be good for 10. Right? And then take that 10 minutes to, get your life vest all snugged up. If you have, crotch straps, put the crotch straps on. And then you've got at least an hour. Even in our water today, this is as cold as it gets, right? About 7, 8 degrees out there would be my guess right now. You've got more than an hour before you become severely hypothermic. Okay, so just remember that, the 1-10-1 principle. And again, what I liked, Dr. Giesbrecht, is that if you don't have this, there is no 1-10-1. And so that's something I'd ask you to be thinking about or taking away from tonight. In our safety courses, we talk about a safety culture, and each boat should have its own safety culture. I can't get away telling stories tonight because I'm around friends. My dock neighbors are here, so they see Roberta and I leave the dock all the time in the summer without wearing these, so we're bad. You'll see us at Sail Past saluting, or we're probably not going to be wearing these, although we should. But it's important that each boat have your own safety culture, right? I mean, I would love to be in a place where maybe you would tell us off. You know, you'd say, hey, Jason, where's your PFD when we're heading out in August? Because it's just as important in August as it is this time of the year. But think about what's the safety culture on your boat. You know, if Roberta and I are out in this weather, yeah, we definitely have these on. Even just presenting to you having this on, I feel more comfortable for some reason. This is my security blanket, right? You know, so on our boat, yeah, when it's colder weather out, we're wearing PFDs. When the wind is above 15 knots on our boat, we're wearing a PFD. If we're out at night, we're wearing a PFD and we're clipped in. And that applies to anybody. You come up out of the cabin into the cockpit, those are the rules that apply. And so when we were traveling around the world and we'd have people join us, the first thing I do when they get on board is I still have it on my iPhone, my crew briefing, right? Because I wanted to make sure everybody understood that there is a safety culture on our boat, and here's what it's expected. And it's always a lot easier to have that discussion up front than, you know, at 2 in the morning. So I think about safety culture and PFDs, but remember the 1-10-1 principle, it's not there without this. You got to have the PFD on. The help position, I don't know if they talked about that too well, but what the help position, what that is, the heat escape lessening position. So what you want to do is protect where you're going to lose a lot of your heat. It's your armpits and your groin. And so basically if you get into the fetal position while you're in the water, that will lessen your exposure. The other thing you may want to try and do is, if possible, if there's something you know, in the water that you can get partially out of the water, you'll be in a much better position. So if you're in the water, if you're the person in the water, just remember the 1-10-1, try and survive that first minute, don't inhale the water. and then you got 10 minutes to get anything you need finger dexterity with, and then you should be good for an hour. Okay.
Have you ever tried to swim with one of those blown up?
Yes, yeah.
How'd it go?
So what we do so there's 2 safety courses that we teach through BC Sailing. The 2-day course, that's the one where we get in the we inflate life rafts. But before we do that, what we do is we get everybody in their sailing outfits, no PFD on, and you jump in the pool. and you see how it feels to be in the water with no PFD on. We get the people out of the water, then they put their PFD on, but with no crotch strap. And so basically what happens is about 75% of the time these things inflate. 25% of the time these things don't inflate. For the ones that do inflate, what happens is it just ends up becoming a noose, right? And so then what we do is we send them in a 3rd time with the crotch straps on, and you can really see the difference. To answer your question, the next drill that we do is we do swimming, and we do a bunch of different drills. And we're doing all the drills with the life raft too, with the life vests on. So we do a fair bit of swimming. What you might find you have to do is sometimes they overinflate a little bit. And the tube that you would blow into, if you take that cap, well, you'll see it a bit later, but you can take that cap and you can deflate it just a little bit, and it makes it a bit more comfortable to swim. But the other thing that if you ever do have the opportunity to have your life vest inflated in a pool or in the ocean, is try and go face down. So with the inflated life raft or the life vest, go face down and see if it turns you upright. And again, about 95% of the time, that's our experience. Some people just have a body mass, and but that's the nice thing about these, right? Is it brings our airway out of the water. So if we do become unconscious, that we can survive that much longer. Did that answer the question? Okay. All right. So that's if we're the person in the water. So now let's do the role reversal. So if you're the person that's still on the boat, what would you do? So we just pulled out of the fairway. We're cruising past the yacht club here, and your partner just went in the water. What are some of the things you would do? Okay, push the MOB button. So my question would be, does everybody here know how to do that on their boat? Yeah, so what some things you may want to take away tonight is some personal action commitment. So that might be a note you want to write down. If you don't know how the MOB button works on your boat, you should find that out. And make sure both of you know how to do it, right? Because no good that Jason knows how to do it if I'm the one in the water. So Roberta needs to know how to do it. Yeah, so push the MOB on your chart plotter. What else would you do?
Throw out a life ring.
Yeah, throw out a life ring. And what purpose would that have?
Give them something to swim to, keep them afloat.
Yeah, right, so it gives them something to swim to, right? It's gonna create some psychological comfort for them to maybe have something to hang off of. The other thing too is, what if this doesn't work, right? I've got something buoyant that I can hold on to. The other thing is, if I'm in the water, how much of me is visible? Right, you're gonna see this much. So your life ring, if I've got cockpit cushions, I got anything that would float, I'm throwing it in the water and creating a debris field. Because all we're going to see is the little head of the person, right? If this doesn't inflate. So create a debris field. So we got our man overboard button pushed, we've got a debris field, we've got some flotation device out.
MOB pull?
Yeah, a man overboard pull, yes. So how many people here have a man overboard pull on their boat? Yeah. So that's a good, again, the kit that you have on board is going to vary by boat. The crew overboard pulls now can be just a little valise even. So even for power boaters, you don't need to have those god-awful ones like we used to have on the sailboats that are 8 feet high. You can get little inflatable pouches. That's what we have on our boat. Just a little inflatable pouch that just goes over, and it becomes a pole that stands about 2 meters out of the water. It has a little yellow flag on it. It has a strobe light. It has a little parachute underwater so that the wind doesn't sweep it away too fast. So yeah, good piece of kit. All right, what other things might we do if our partner goes in the water?
Are you sailing or?
Yeah, let's say we're sailing.
Start your engine.
Start your engine. Okay, so that would be my other question. Does everybody know how to start the engine on their boat? Does everybody know how to put the boat in gear? Does everybody know how to maneuver and come back to their partner?
You're on warranty.
Yeah. Yes.
Do you encourage using the Mayday feature on your radio?
Yes. Yeah. So we've got. So in my opinion, if Roberta goes over, I go over, we're a crew of 2. I'm calling a Mayday. Particularly, I'm hoping Roberta does it if I go over. I just don't know if she's getting me out of the water. Right? That's the reality, right? Is that, are you going to be able to pull your 200-pound spouse out of the water?
Oh dear.
Right? So that could be a bit contentious whether you call a Mayday or a pan-pan. If it was my sailing, my racing crew, we'd be probably calling a pan-pan because we're all trained. I know, we know how to get back to them. We're all trained. We have, 5 other still able-bodied people. If it's my wife and I'm thinking of calling a Mayday. And again, so the digital selective calling, the DSC button, many of your radios have a little red button. Do you all know how to use your DSC feature? So that might be a good sales point for the next lecture. Right? So yeah, use your DSC feature, right? Because you're alone, you're busy. If you're throwing, hitting man overboard buttons, trying to turn the engine on, get the sails down, get back to them, you don't have a lot of time to be talking on the radio, so that's where the DSC can be a nice feature, right? So you can get a call out pretty quick.
We've always sort of talked about if that ever happened, your upwind is just to do a quick attack and let the main go to essentially heave to, because then everything gets quiet, the wind noise goes down, you might be able to still scream at each other depending on, the distance you are apart.
Yes.
To communicate before even starting the engine or anything else, because the thought of like trying to fart around, find the key for, getting the engine started if you're worried, watch the other person while the boat's still moving away, to me is the bigger threat.
Yeah, so there's a lot of good thought around that. So there are various techniques that you can use to get back to the person in the water. What I suggest is learn a couple different methods. Every boat will be different. I absolutely subscribe to your same school. For me, it's you heave to. It's an immediate heave to, provided you don't have a spinnaker up, right? Then it gets a bit more difficult. But if you've got white sails up, heave to immediately. You don't need to touch anything. You just turn the boat, just tack through the wind. The boat stops, and yeah, the crew overboard, if you do it quick enough, they're about a boat length behind you. Calm down, right? Now you can get stuff. Are they conscious? Can they swim to you? You're not going away from them at 5 or 7 knots, right? So yeah, but you need to know what works on your boat, because there's some boats out there that won't heave to, and so there's different methods that you can learn, and it's yeah. So, and then power boats as well. There's different techniques to use to get back. Okay, so we've talked about a good bunch of things there. So
Jason, sorry, question about the lifeline, throwing the ring in and it's about 75 feet or whatever line.
Yes.
I've only got, so should that be attached to the boat or not?
Yeah, so the life ring, no, right? Because you want that to be a buoyant object for the person to hang on to. What we also have on our boat, well, what the safety requirements say, you have to have a life ring and a heaving bag, right? So maybe the life ring goes free, and you've still got your heaving bag to throw to the person as you're coming close to them. On my boat, we also have something called a life sling, and many of you probably have that as well. That I have attached to my boat. The legal requirement is 5 meters, 15 meters, what's that in Imperial, 45 feet, 50 feet?
50 feet, yeah.
I tell you, try taking 2 of your fenders, tie them together end to end, throw it in the water, drag your ring behind you with your 15 meters or 50 feet of line, or even your life sling, you'll never lasso it. The picture shows that you can lasso it. You can't turn your boat that in 50 feet. But anyways, these are things you need to try so that you're comfortable and you're practiced with it. But yeah, so what my key point is here, if you're the person on the boat, do both of you know how to operate the vessel? Can you both turn the engine on and return, right? I would say that that's not the case in many situations. Do you both know how to operate the DSC, April 12th, right? Know how to operate the radio, the COB, right? The crew overboard or man overboard button on the chart plotter. Locate and use safety equipment. Do you all know where the flares are on your boat? Do you all know where the air horn is on your boat? Are they operable, right? So yeah, the location and the operation. Does everybody, if you have a life sling, do you both know how to deploy it and use it? Right, so a lot of questions for you. Do you know where the flares are, the crew overboard pole, life sling, air horn, and the $1 million question: how are you going to get them back on the boat? Okay, I didn't put the $1 million question up. Yeah, how are you going to get them back on the boat? So this is something that I really want you to think about for your boat, because every boat is going to be different. And the weather conditions are going to be different. So maybe you have a power boat with a nice swim grid. If you're out in a 1 meter or 2 meter sea, what's happening with that swim grid, right? So how are you going to get your partner on board? So be thinking about that for your boat. With sailboats, we've got some advantage with the mast and winches and lines that we can put down. So one of the things that I'd like you to think about is there is a 1-day coastal personal safety course that's being offered. There's still a couple seats at Royal Victoria Yacht Club in March. It's like $144 to attend. It gets you free lunch. And anyways, it's a great course, but the purpose of that course, what they do is they actually do they'll do this practical that we're going to do with the PFDs, but the other practical that they do is they put a 200-pound dummy in the water. And you figure out how to get it back on board. And so what they have is they have a life sling. You can use the life sling and get practice with that. They have something called a par buckle. So some of you may have heard about, well, you just rig a storm sail up along the side of your boat, right? And you could put the corner down into the water, hooked up to a halyard, and roll the person in. So it's kind of that kind of a design, the par buckle. It takes like 15 minutes to rig, and 50% of the time the crew overboard falls through and back into the water. So it's the most expensive thing, and you think it would be the slick thing, and it doesn't necessarily work. You know what works the best? A simple dock line. A simple dock line under the arms, a knot, a halyard, they're on board in no time at all. Anyways, think about that course. You get to practice all these things. But think about what you would do on your boat. Every boat is different. You know, some of you have a nice sugar scoop stern where you can bring somebody in. Others have a high freeboard. But how are you going to get your 150 to 200 pound partner on board, especially if they're incapacitated? All right, let's talk about equipment. So here's our Bible for what the safety equipment that we need to have on board. This is the Transport Canada. You can search this, the Safe Boating Guide. And there's basically 13 things that we need to have on board from a legality reason. You can't read this, but let's just use this. Boats 40 feet to 78 feet. You need to have one life jacket or PFD for each person on board. Are these things legal if they're not worn? No, they're absolutely not legal. These things are legal if they're not worn, right? But so understand that if you don't have any of these on board, you only have inflatable PFDs. If the police come by and do a check on you, or the Coast Guard, you're not legal with these unless you're wearing them. Okay, so yeah, so is there a PFD for everybody on board? The buoyant heaving line, yeah, 15 meters. One life buoy equipped with a self-igniting light attached to a buoyant line of 15 meters, and one reboarding device or a ladder, some way to get the person back up on board if they can climb. That's all you need legally for overboard. Of course, there's a lot of other things we need for ship safety, like a compass, air horns, radar reflectors, bilge pumps, flares, yeah. Anyways, go to the Safe Boating Guide and you can look and see what the things are. So that's the minimum requirement, right? The government wants to make boating accessible, so they don't want to have a bunch of rules and regulations that prevent people from getting out in the water, so they have a very minimal list of what you need to be legal. But what you want to probably have on board looks something more like this, right? And again, this is going to depend on the culture, the safety culture of your boat, and every boat is a little bit different. Up here on the top left, we've got the life sling, which is a great device for getting people out of the water. We've got a crew overboard pole. That's what this is here. So you can see it's just an inflatable pole. It has the same CO2 cartridge like these do, and it inflates. They're great to have. This here is it's like a pulley system, so you've got like a 3-to-1 purchase. And again, at the one-day safety course, we use these. And I actually had a 12-year-old girl pull the 200-pound dummy out of the water using this with the 3-to-1 purchase. So that might be a good piece of kit, you know, for us as couples boating. Of course, PFDs and these are tethers, right, to keep you hooked up to the boat. That's all this is here. All right, so yeah, so these aren't necessarily required for legal reasons, but you know, think about what you want to have on board, because I'm sure your partner's life is worth a lot more than any of those things cost. Over to training. So there's a lot of training that's available. So you know, Canadian Power and Sail Squadrons offer, you know, very inexpensive training. If anybody's interested, Sail Canada and BC Sailing. I'd really recommend you think about if this is an interesting topic for you, either the 1 or the 2-day coastal personal safety course, or the offshore personal safety course. That's 2 days. Like I said, those programs are run at cost. So the 1 day is $144, and you know, they bring out all kinds. That's basically what the fee goes to, is to buy this equipment so that it's available for us as boaters. And speaking to Paul, you know, if that session does fill up, if there's enough interest here, we could always see about running one out of our yacht club, seeing about having a sanctioned 1-day safety course. And what we would do is get a couple of us to volunteer our boats. We'd bring the dummies in, and we could practice doing crew overboard, like getting the people out of the water. Because the thing that we learned in, like with the Sail Canada training, I teach my students in the basic course, we just teach what's called the figure 8, because it avoids jibing, which is a dangerous maneuver. So that's why in basic they teach you figure 8 to get back to the person. In the intermediate course, I teach 3 different ways to get back. And I like what's called the quick stop, which is the one you and I were speaking of. But again, it all depends on which works best for your boat. The key is, though, is that those safety courses, we teach you how to get back to the person, but we don't teach you what to do once you get back. how do you get them on, right? So that's why I'm a big proponent of the one-day safety course. And of course, all the information about shock, hypothermia, please consider taking a first aid course. So that's some of the training you might be interested in. And what I'd like to do to wrap up is to just do a bit of a PFD practical. So we have some choices, right, with PFDs, right? So this is an inherently buoyant life jacket, right? So this meets SOLAS, which is the international requirements, right? It's got reflective pouches and a whistle, but these are very uncomfortable to wear, right? Like I wouldn't have been comfortable teaching you here for the past hour with this thing on, right? I've actually been in a marine disaster or emergency, and this is what we were given, and yeah, they're not nice. This is my latest purchase at the boat show. So I bought this year. So now I have one of these on board. So this is an inherently inflatable life vest. So these are really good, and you saw in the video that why I have one of these finally on my boat. One of the drills that we do in the pool with the 2-day course is we have somebody go in the water and we throw one of these inflated to them. It's damn near impossible to get one of these things on when it's inflated. So Roberta and I now keep this on the boat. I have this on the boat in case we're ever listening to Channel 16 and there's somebody in the water. Now I've got something I can throw somebody that they have a chance of putting on. And just remember with these things, if you're trying to teach somebody, or you're responding to an emergency, is put the inside up to the air, put the neck to neck, and then they should be able to put their hands in and flip it over their head to get it on. I can demonstrate it. And now imagine doing that in the water, right? And see, I can't even do it on land. But anyways, yeah, so very, very difficult to put on, but a heck of a lot easier than this is never going to happen. So yeah, so think about having those on. So how much maintenance do I need to do on these?
Zero.
Absolutely zero, right? Deadly uncomfortable, not going to be fun in August, right? Too warm. But they take no maintenance. I can have them on the boat. They can sit there. I'm legal. So that's the reason why most of us have these, right? The point I want to really drill home with these things, so when we do our pool exercise, like I said, only about 75% of the time these things inflate. So what I want you to think of these as manually inflated life vests with an automatic override. Right? So think of them as that way. You'll notice I don't even need to look where it is, right? I've got a mental memory of where my handle is. I know how to deploy this. It's ingrained in my head. That's the way you need to be. So on your PFDs, your inflatables, know where to find your handle without even looking or thinking for it. And yeah, remember that the chances are these may not inflate. So you need to know how to open them up to get to the oral inflator and to be able to inflate them. So that's one thing I want to do in a couple minutes. The other thing is that here's the operating instructions for this thing. Well, actually, this is the Mustang, right? So many of you have this one here. So here's the operating instructions for a Mustang. This is the checklist every time you use it. I'm guilty for not following that checklist every time that I use it. But anyway, so some of the things to look out for, and it doesn't take very long, right? Is the needle, is it green, right? If you got a hammer, right? This one here has a little green indicator on it. Do you check that every time you put it on? You need to look for any damage. So that makes sense. That would only take me a second as I'm putting it on. Make sure that the waist belt isn't twisted on you. And of course, once you have it on, make sure that it's fairly snug. So that's before you wear it every time. What I'd like to do now is to go through what we're supposed to do every 6 months, which is to actually open it up and to do a leak test. So that's what I'd like us to do now. If you brought a PFD, is let's pull them out. I'd like you to open them up. Just be very careful when you open them up that you don't accidentally deploy it. See if you can find your oral inflation tube and orally inflate your life vest. And while we're doing that, have a look. Make sure your CO2 cartridge is all the way in. CO2 cartridge in it, but when we're doing the pool exercises, what we find why a lot of time they fail is it's just the cartridge is backed out a little bit. So when you're opening it up, do make sure that the cartridge is in and tight. Many of these, like the spin locks and the Mustangs, will actually have expiry dates now on the inflator, so be aware of that. With the manual inflation tube, one important thing is to you could break and mess up your valve by using your finger. So what you do is you just take the cap, if you turn it upside down, it has a little nipple, and that will deflate your vest for you. And of course, before you stow it again, make sure that your cap is on. All right, the other thing, question was, yeah, it's a good idea on your boat to have an extra canister and inflator for your type of life vest. And then there are some other types of equipment that you might want to consider. I won't fully unpack this one here, but what I've got in one of our spin locks, what Roberta and I have, this is called an AIS MOB. So if we go in the water, anybody with a chart plotter that has AIS, we show up on their chart plotter with this little device. So that's a nice little thing too, especially if you're doing night sailing and things, or like for us it was offshore. And in the, that was always my fear. I'd wake up after my 3-hour watch and there would be no Roberta. So we have these on our boat. So yeah, we can see if somebody falls in the water. So yeah, so what I'd like you to do is please visit the owner's manual for your life vest. And when you're restowing it, make sure you're following their requirements, right? And their instructions. The last thing that I want to hear is that somebody attended this course, pulled their life vest out and put it back and had it twisted or something, and then they fell in the water and it didn't deploy because it wasn't put away properly. So please go to the user manual for your life vest and make sure that you've repacked it according to their specifications. And please, on a 6-month or at least annual, so Mustang wants you to do this every 6 months. When we're racing, I have to sign off. So for my crew, I have to sign off that they've all done it in the past year and that we've done an inflation test and that they're all the dates on them are valid. And I'm held liable as the skipper if that's not done. All right, so that is everything. So yeah, so thank you, thank you very much for coming down tonight and for devoting this much time to safety. And yeah, hopefully I've given you some things to think about, to take back, some homework to go and do on your boat to better prepare you in case this unfortunate situation happens to any of you. So thank you very much.